Hello Internet, I'm the Disney Brain, and the topic of today's video is something that's been on my mind for years now. And with us having gone so deep into how various Ranger characters work over the last few months, I figured it would be interesting to at least some of you to discuss character arcs, but specifically how understandably overvalued they seem to be when discussing this franchise. And I use the term understandably here, because there's no shortage of PR characters, be them hero or villain, that stand out because of how the story in question changed them. Look no further than the likes of villains like Jared, and heroes like Wes Collins. And I'd be remiss to not include supporting characters like Bulk and Skull, both of whom have run-ins and brush-ups with all manner of responsibilities before they eventually come into their own as allies of justice. Allies ready to fight alongside the heroes they were once so desperate to expose. All of that and more is very well and good, but something that tends to happen as a result is the subsequent devaluing of characters without a prototypical arc or a long-spanning journey of self-actualization, or that there is inherently less interesting ideas to bring up when a character is deemed to not be doing anything, whatever that even means. But I find a lot of characters in this franchise, and in several Toku shows in general, a lot more interesting, and work a lot better within the confines of their story because they are fairly static. That designation isn't indicative of a lack of character, because what it can give us is access to story beats and ideas that can't be as well conveyed simply by becoming traditionally better, stronger, or more experienced at doing the hero thing. So allow me to take you through a few of my favorite PR examples to illustrate that exact point. Z Delgado isn't a ranger I sing the praises of ad nauseum, admittedly, but I think she represents perhaps my favorite example of a character who never needed a character arc to be compelling. And what makes Z compelling to me is the idea of societal change that she embodies more so than any other singular member of Space Patrol Delta. The particular circumstances that lead to the rough upbringing she had are a bit poorly written, since we're expected to believe that Kruger intentionally left the known children of two of his subordinates in the streets, but we'll focus on Kruger some other day. The real point is that as a starting and ending point, Z is meant to represent what SPD strives to be, as opposed to what it many times comes off as. SPD is the exact big sweeping change she dreamed about, while Jack was always a bit more wary of that sentiment. Her ambition drove her to master the SPD handbook, but importantly, not master it in the kind of way Sky probably did, where the letter of the law triumphs the spirit of it. Z knows what it feels like to be on the receiving end of an unkind world that still finds ways to torment those who are different, even after Earth's alien integration speedrun. Fast forward to the modern day, and Sam is going through the exact same thing. Sam isn't presented as a chance to change Z's ways, or to undo some mistakes she already made. Just the opposite. It gives us the chance to understand the Z we see now. It gives us the chance to see why Z's personal Ranger goals are so very personal. SPD as an organization in 2025 is several steps removed from fully abiding by the ideals they strive for. After all, we can't be expected to buy into it being some sort of coincidence that their most highly regarded officers are either turncoats or Sky. But Z is meant to be a step in the right direction, a force against prejudice, someone who can, and eventually does, use her unique sense of empathy to turn Sam into a future Ranger himself. Granted, once future Sam does show up, barely any attention is paid to that all-too-important detail for reasons I can neither fathom nor defend. Bruce Kalish was notably a bit carefree when it came to such details, but it still works as an interesting story beat where you have the exact right kinds of people cultivating a better SPD, and said people are at times actively pushing the less than ideal sort into seeing things beyond their jarringly walled-off perspectives. Rangers like Z make their critique of characters not doing anything ring hollow more times than not. Doing this very job is the thing she's doing. It's all she ever wanted to do, and she's good at it. And again, just to hammer the point home, SPD acquires even more talented, motivated individuals directly because of that. when we talk about SBD, it's natural to gravitate towards Sky's actual character arc or even Bridge's absurdly high levels of charm. But lost inside that, I feel at times, is everything Z means to the season. She didn't need a journey, she just needed the right job, and a lot would be lost here without the optimistic, forward-thinking standards she sets in ways that the rest of her team are not at all equipped to do. Moving on to the other side of the conflict, let's talk about Lothor, who many fans love now, though right alongside Ninja Storm proper, that wasn't always the case. But I think with Lothor specifically, there's an interesting and underappreciated layer to the way he's written for that stems beyond the bounds of him just being funny, or just breaking the fourth wall on occasion. Ninja Storm in many ways proved to be something of a soft reboot tonally from the way the later Saban era conducted itself. So even though it has moments where it goes about its business as if the past was non-existent, it still leans on its past as the foundation for many of their jokes. Plus, their connections to later seasons make that point moot anyways, but neither here nor there. My actual point is that even beyond the obvious jokes, a lot of Lothor's charm to me comes from how much his writing actively rejects the status quo the previous era set, and not in some type of mean-spirited Rancic and Master Org were way too serious type of way, but more in a playful, creative, we don't need that exact vibe to carry our intentionally silly season type of way. As such, Lothor has the pretense of a late Saban era villain, but the execution of an early Saban era villain. So to me, the funniest joke with Lothor is how little it matters that he's literally evil sensei. If anything, Grant McFarlane's double duty here could be interpreted as part of the joke, however intentionally. But that having been said, there is no reason to believe that most of this wasn't by design. Just about the same team worked on Dino Thunder, and the familial angle there is a major focal point from the moment it reveals itself. They could have structured the entire Thunder Rangers arc around how painful it is to Sensei that even more ninja students have fallen to darkness, and then that could naturally bridge into Cam's journey. But such details aren't even implied, because Ninja Storm wanted to be something unique to PR, and what they ended up deciding on was Johnny Capahala, Motocrossed, and Brink, but with morphers, because that's basically Doug Sloan's resume in a nutshell. But then, looking beyond that, we see a season that fought to maintain their own status quo and treat proceedings as laxly as possible. So much so that the nieces ending up as good guys in the end is just a thing that happens. The fact that Cam has alien cousins that rely on him now is just as relaxed as literally 90% of the things Dustin says. And that to me is what makes Ninja Storm what it is, and why, even though Lothor could have had some big crazy arc about reconnecting to family, he doesn't. And it still mostly works for what this season wants to accomplish, even if it might not have in another season. And lastly, to round things off, let's bring in a supporting character. I heavily considered using Fran for this, partly because I love her to death, and partly because her influence on the arcs of other Jungle Fury characters fits this video topic to a T. But I think it would add more to the discourse to bring in a more recent season, since those, and MMPR to some degree, end up being the poster children for this overemphasis on character arcs as a mark of character quality. So, let's talk about Mick. Pound for pound, Ninja Steel ended up being one of the better uses of a school setting in this franchise, and as a teacher-mentor hybrid, Mick greatly contributed to that in the exact ways I wish Tommy had back when he took on the exact same type of role. I always enjoyed the frenetic way he honed in on many of the Rangers' problems and found an indirect way to lead them towards their own solutions. In general, Ninja Steel's focus on several educators ended up being a blessing, as they ended up with at least 2, and arguably 3, good ones. And importantly, every single one of them were fully capable of approaching these kids as people, willing to admit their own mistakes on top of helping them sort out their school lives. So while I, and most of the fan base really, have no shortage of gripes with this season as a whole, Summer Cove High School and everything it means is not one of them, at least to me. And Mick embodying all of that, while also being portrayed by the endlessly entertaining Kelson Henderson, is more than I ever thought Ninja Steel would give us on the onset. All in all, Power Rangers as a franchise doesn't need character arcs. It doesn't need dramatic, season-long, high-stakes changes from all of its characters for viable arguments to be made as to why any given character is a good one. I wanted to highlight these 3 examples not because I've fallen out of love with character arcs, make no mistake, but since the term has become such a poorly utilized buzzword in many fandom circles, I thought I'd add more appreciation for character ideas. Because even though the people mentioned don't really change in the notable, permanent way that, say, Jen Scott's does, for example, they all represent a concept that is so very integral, thematically or otherwise, to the season they find themselves in. On top of the examples provided, the same could be said for Decker, the same could be said for Commander Stanton, and the same could be said for both Kendricks and Kendall Morgan. We should absolutely keep discussing what makes great character arcs so appealing and so satisfying for so many. But while we do that, let's also make room for how characters can impact a story without necessarily feeling the brunt of that impact on themselves. So, with all that said, let me know down below your favorite examples of PR characters that neither change much nor have to. And if you enjoyed this discussion, throw down a like or whatever so that we can beat the dreaded YouTube algorithm. Then I'll see most of you again when we discuss how good Dino Fury has been so far, as we usually do around this time of year. So, until then, thanks for watching.